Hello and welcome back for another historic video. Today we'll be taking a look at this blue-green Venerated Rotpriest deck. The namesake card, Venerated Rotpriest, for 1 green mana, is a 1/2 creature with Toxic 1, meaning whenever it deals combat damage to a player, they also get a poison counter. Additionally, the Rotpriest has the ability that states whenever a creature we control becomes the target of a spell, then target opponent gets a poison counter. So in our deck, we will actively be targeting our Rotpriest to try and give our opponent additional poison. Then if our opponent uses a targeted removal spell on one of our Rotpriest, this also triggers. We have a couple cards in our deck to help either dig for this card or create additional copies once it's already on the battlefield. The first one is the Mockingbird, which is a 1 mana X spell, and when it comes into the battlefield, we can have it enter as a copy of target creature with mana value less than or equal to the amount of mana used to cast the creature. And it will also have flying, which is good because the evasion will allow the Rotpriest to attack over any ground blockers and deal additional poison damage. To tutor the Rotpriest from our deck, we have 4 copies of Green Sun Zenith, which allow us to search our library for a creature card with mana value X or less and put it into the battlefield. So for 2 mana, we can dig up one of our Rotpriest. If we already have a Rotpriest in play, we can use March of Burgeoning Life, but this also lets us search our library for a creature with mana value X or less that has the same name as a creature that we already have and put it onto the battlefield. So for this one, we do need to have at least 1 Rotpriest on the battlefield, which is why we're only running 2 copies. And then we also have 2 copies of Invasion of Ikoria, which when it enters, we can search our library or graveyard for a non-human creature with mana value X or less and put it on the battlefield. And so we can first grab one from our graveyard if there's one in there that was killed with removal or discard. And then if there isn't, we can always grab one out of our library. And most of the time, we will be attacking our opponent instead of the battle. So we don't expect to see the backside of this in play. But if we do flip it over, it is an 8/8 reach creature. And then its secondary ability states that for each non-human creature we control, we can have it assign combat damage as though if it weren't blocked, which means the Rotpriest can get through and deal poison damage even if our opponent does chump block them. As part of our tutor package, we've also included 1 copy of Ivy, Gleeful Spell Thief, which is a 2/1 flying creature. And whenever a player casts a spell that targets only a single creature other than Ivy, we can copy that spell and the copy targets Ivy. So we can target our own Rotpriest with one of our spells, and then we can get an extra copy, essentially getting more Rotpriest triggers. Similar, if our opponent targets Rotpriest, we can choose to have a copy target Ivy as well, again, getting additional poison triggers. Then there's a single copy of Deathrite Shaman, mainly included as graveyard hate. We would like to be able to exile creatures from our opponent's graveyard in case we come up against a reanimation strategy or one of the persist combo decks. Then the remainder of the cards are all target abilities that we have, and they fall into 2 main categories. The first one is just a value card, and the second one is protection spells. So for value cards, we have Experimental Augury. This 2 mana instant lets us look at the top 3 cards of our library and put one of them into our hand. Then it also allows us to proliferate. So if our opponent already has a poison counter, we can add an additional one. Hidden Strings, a 2 mana sorcery, lets us tap or untap target permanent, and then we can also tap or untap a second permanent. So we really want to target at least 1 Rotpriest with this, and then we can also target our lands or a second Rotpriest. And then Hidden Strings also has the Cipher ability, which means that after it's cast, we can imprint it into a creature that we have. And when that creature deals combat damage, we get to cast this spell for free, which provides card advantage and a recursion where we can continue to target our creatures over and over again, dealing additional poison. We're running a single copy of Sinister Reflections. This 2 mana instant lets us conjure a duplicate of up to 2 target non-token creatures we control into our hand. So if we have 1 Rotpriest, we can always use it to get an additional one. but ideally we'd like to be able to target 2 Rot Priests and generate 2 additional creatures in our hand. Next up is Tandem Takedown. This 3 mana instant allows us to target up to 2 of our creatures. They each get +1/+0 until end of turn, and then we can deal damage equal to their power to another target creature, planeswalker, or battle. This can be pointed at an opponent's creature as a removal spell, or if we have 3 creatures in play, we can always target ourselves as well, getting additional copies of the Rotpriest's poison ability. For protection spells, we have 2 copies of Sure Up. This 1 mana instant gives one of our creatures +1/+0 and hexproof until end of turn, and then we also get to untap it. 2 copies of Serum Snare. This 2 mana instant lets us return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand, and if that permanent had mana value 3 or less, we can proliferate. So this card can either be used to protect one of our Rot Priests from a removal spell, or it can be used as a tempo card to bounce one of our opponent's creatures. This can also be used to remove a lock piece from play temporarily. We have 2 copies of Unnatural Restoration. This 2 mana sorcery lets us return a permanent card from our graveyard to our hand, and then we get to proliferate. So as a mid-game card, if our opponent is starting to deal with our Rot Priest, we're able to get some back from the graveyard. And if we've already dealt poison damage, then we can add another counter. There's a single copy of March of Swirling Mist. This 1 mana X spell allows us to exile blue cards from our hand to reduce the cost, and it allows us to phase out up to X target creatures. This is a good way to target multiple Rot Priests with a single card, dealing multiples of the poison damage. And then the last spell is Tyvar's Stand. This 1 mana X spell gives one of our creatures +X/+X, and it gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. It can be used either as a combat trick, or it can be used as a protection spell. For the mana base, we're playing a single copy of Boseiju Who Endures, which can also be used to destroy target artifact, enchantment, or non-basic land an opponent controls, if they happen to have a lock piece that is preventing us from winning. We have 2 copies of the Blue-Green Pathway, 4 copies of the Botanical Sanctum, 4 copies of Breeding Pool, a single copy of Waterlogged Grove, and 4 copies of Yavimaya Coast. And then there are 2 copies of Starting Town, which could generate black mana if we really need it for Deathrite Shaman, but is really just used for mana fixing between our blue and green. And lastly, there are 4 Bridgeworks Battle, which can either target one of our Rot Priests to get a poison trigger, or we can use it as the Tanglespan Bridgeworks land if we need the mana. All of our lands were selected because they have the ability to come into the battlefield untapped, which allows us to play out our Venerated Rotpriest on turn 1. Having the early game boost, potentially getting in some attacks before our opponent has blockers, can be useful. And it also helps us curve out because we are running a fairly compact deck here. This deck is not running any actual removal spells, so it'll be interesting to see how it holds up against the current meta.
Before we jump into the gameplay, I'd like to ask you to please like and subscribe the video. It really helps the channel. And without further ado, let's jump into the games.
Here we have a good opening hand. Double Rot Priest, some interaction for our opponent. We'll keep. We'll lead off on the Sanctum, and then play out our first Rot Priest. We'll attack first with the Rot Priest. Then we will use Hidden Strings. Untap 2 of our permanents. And we'll Cipher onto the Rot Priest. Then here we can play out our second one. Should have untapped the Sanctum, saved us 1 life. Our opponent looks to be on a hammer deck. Serum Snare will be really good against them. So here we'll play out the other Yavimaya. We can play out our Mockingbird, copying one of our Rotpriests, and then swing for 2. And our opponent concedes. Here we would have been able to use Hidden Strings again, and then also had a Serum Snare, so that might have even been close to lethal already without doing the math. This hand is pretty good. We'll keep it. Can play out a couple early Rotpriests, and then see what our opponent has for interaction. So far, nothing. I think here we will hold up the Green Sun. Grab another Rotpriest. March requires a creature to be alive to target it, so that's why we didn't use it there in case our opponent had removal. Now they're tapped out, so it's better. So we'll attack in first. Opponent takes the damage. We'll untap. Let's tap our mana manually so that we ensure that the proper mana is tapped. And we'll untap our Sanctum. We will equip to the tapped one, and our opponent concedes. This hand is missing access to a Rotpriest. It has to be a mulligan. This is better. And then I think that we put back the Ivy here. Start out with the tapped land. Mystic Elves from our opponent's side of the board. We'll prioritize green mana because of the takedown. And then we'll go grab our first Rotpriest. Kinnan deck on our opponent's side of the field. We can give them one turn. So I think here we will use our Hidden Strings. And we can tap down the Kinnan, or we can target the Rotpriest. I don't think it really matters. And then we'll untap our Breeding Pool. Cypher onto the Rotpriest. Then we can copy the Rotpriest. Hit for 1. Play our Hidden Strings. We can untap our Breeding Pool and our Rotpriest. 2 more poison. And then we can play out another Mockingbird and copy our Rotpriest again. Next turn, Tandem Takedown will have double trigger on the Rotpriest, so that will be 6 more poison, and then we should be able to kill them in the air. Notably, with Tandem Takedown, we can also target our own Rotpriest, and that would be 9 poison, so either route should work. And our opponent taps out, so that should be game. Birds of Paradise won't help them. And our opponent concedes even before seeing lethal. This hand is fine. We can use the Bridgework Battle as lands if we don't draw into more. So here we'll start with the Rotpriest. Our opponent doesn't want to play with us. This hand has a turn 2 Rotpriest. Turn 3 we can tutor up more or use the Mockingbird. We'll keep it. Start off on a tapped breeding pool. Our opponent appears to be on Merfolk. Should be a close matchup. We'll prioritize green here and go grab our first Rotpriest. Don't expect our opponent to have too much interaction for our creatures. However, they can counter our instant and sorcery spells. We'll take 2. Another Rotpriest off the top is good. We'll play out the Mockingbird. Or, we can hold up Tyvar's Stand if we want to attack into the Tunnel Guide. We'll give that a try first. Our opponent might not block, in which case then we can play out the Mockingbird. Or actually, to be mana efficient, we'll use the Green Sun for another Rotpriest. Three mana from our opponent. Now all of their merfolk will have Island Walk, so they'll be unblockable. Means we are in quite a bit of trouble. They don't want a collected company, which means they might already have one. So here we will start with the hidden strings. We'll tap manually. Do we want to play out the Mockingbird first? I think we do. So then here hidden strings will give 4 poison. We'll untap a dual land. This should be lethal with our opponent only having 2 blockers. We'll swing in. That was objectively a mistake as well. You should always block the one with the Cipher. Not that it matters in this scenario. Then we would have been able to cast Hidden Strings again for additional poison if needed, since our opponent blocked in correctly. Good game. This hand can tutor up some Rotpriests and then copy with Mockingbird against a red aggro deck, so they are able to answer our Rotpriests. We'll still play them out. Removal spells add poison. Second Swift Spear, so if they're playing the pump version, then we could be in a bit of trouble, and it looks like they are. No block. Tyvar's Stand is a good pickup. We'll play Yavimaya, and then we will copy our Rotpriest. I think we do hold up Tyvar's Stand. Indestructible means if our opponent doesn't have trample, then we can absorb some damage. Kiln Fiend also to get quite large, so they're likely playing a lot of trample cards. And I think we are going to absorb the 7 damage instead of waiting for additional Rotpriests. So we can swing back here and put our opponent up to 5 poison. Hitting strings is 7 poison. Augury is 8 poison. We would need to find another spell off the Augury. I think we give it a try. We will untap the original Rotpriest since the flying one has more evasion if we do need to attack in next turn. And then we'll cipher onto the flying. Here we can Green Sun actually for another Rotpriest. Now all of our opponent's creatures have trample. We're dead on board at the moment, so we need to block. They can also use Reckless Charge, which they didn't use, indicating they do have more pump spells in hand. Any spell here will do it. So we were a bit slow. This hand is good. Has a turn 1 Rotpriest. We can tutor up a second one on turn 2 if needed. We'll keep. Swamp from our opponent. Based on that, I think we'll actually wait to play out our Rotpriest till we can hold up protection. It appears to be Rakdos. We'll take 1 damage here. No immediate removal spell. That's a bit surprising. We'll try and hit for 1. That works. We'll tutor up a second Rotpriest and continue to hold up our protection spell. Xander's Lounge. Draw another Green Sun. Which I just realized looks like our graveyard is not showing up. I'll try restarting the client after this game, see if that fixes the problem. I don't think Overlord will save them here. They are on a reanimation deck, but they're just going to be too slow. So we'll shore up. Our opponent will get 3 poison. And yep, we had this one in the bag. Our opponent stumbled a little bit coming out of the gates there. This hand is not any good. Here we have at least 1 tutor. I think we throw back the takedown actually. We don't have access to 2 Rotpriests at the moment, which is really what you want. Opponent on a blue deck of some type. We'll get out our Rotpriest. If they're on a counterspell deck, this might incentivize them to play out cards on their turn since they'll need a blocker. 2 mana Narset.
Meditate and prepare.
I think it's important enough to try and take out Narset here. Try and prevent them card advantage, and if they have a wheel, then we don't want to lose our hand.
I was not prepared for this.
No spell from our opponent. We'll attempt Hidden Strings. This is likely going to get countered. And it does. Our opponent is up to 3 poison. We'd really like another way to tutor for a Rotpriest. Not playing out the Rhystic Study indicates to us that our opponent does have another counterspell in hand. We'll start with the Serum Snare. If I were my opponent, I would just let this go back to hand. They decide to counter it. We'll take the counter, and then here we will conjure a duplicate of Rotpriest to our hand. Pass the turn. Now they play out the study. They might be running low on counter spells. Fading Hope is fine. Puts our opponent up to 5 poison. The Narset is definitely in here so that when they use the Time Twister, they can end up making us discard our entire hand. So we'll run out our Rotpriests. And I don't think we pay. We'll let them draw cards. Since that resolves, now we will pay. We wanted to hold up Unnatural Restoration if our opponent countered the first one. They're going to take an extra turn. Means this attack is free. They discarded 2 cards. What did they get rid of? A Fading Hope and a 3 Steps Ahead. So 1 counter spell, and the Fading Hope makes sense because they don't really want to bounce our Rotpriest. Alpha providing quite a bit of value to our opponent. So let's see. We can play out both of the Rotpriest. We can take out the Oracle. I think that's what we have to try for. For poison to our opponent, so they can no longer target any of our Rotpriests. I don't know how many cards they've drawn this turn, probably close to 10 additional cards with the Rhystic Study and the Howling Mine. And they found Ancestral Recall already. No Moxen yet. That's surprising. They present their secondary win condition. That's probably their primary win condition. Trying to draw through their deck, mill us out. And looks like they have tapped out. They can still draw cards like Black Lotus to hold up interaction. And it looks like it will be game. We can just attack for the last poison. Bit of a nail biter there. This hand has a Rotpriest, hidden strings to activate. We can also search up another with Ikoria. We'll keep it. Start on the Rotpriest. Our opponent has taken one mulligan. They're not likely to find anything useful in our library. Here we can use the hidden strings. We'll cipher onto the Rotpriest. Untap both. Then we can pass the turn. Another heist. Here we can use the invasion. Grab another Rotpriest before attacking. Attack our opponent directly. Untap the Rotpriest and the land. Pass the turn. If our opponent doesn't have anything here, we should win the game. And the Serum Snare will do it. We'll untap our Rotpriest and one of our Sanctums. Float a blue. And our opponent is dead. This hand isn't bad. Rotpriest, some protection spells. We'll give it a go. Start off on the Sanctum. A mud deck from our opponent. We'll play out Mockingbird, and we can hold up Tyvar's Stand. They have a bit of ramp. Wait for 2. And then we can invasion for another Rotpriest. Searching our library. Next turn, if our opponent doesn't interact with our Rotpriest, I do believe we have lethal. One ring will grant them a turn of protection. I think we will hold on to our Bridgeworks Battle. Could have attacked the invasion there, but I don't think it will transform unless our opponent has another one ring. Five mana showing from our opponent. They draw a card. Since we don't win with combat damage, it is pretty free for them to use the one ring. And here we are punished by not attacking the invasion last turn. I don't think they will have a sweeper, so we'll play out another Rotpriest. Here we will attack the invasion now. 2 targeted spells will kill our opponent with poison. More ramp from our opponent. And a third One Ring, so we could be in trouble if they have Ugin, the Spirit Dragon. We do have 2 instant speed spells, so we can give 8 poison to our opponent at instant speed. So I think this is a win. We don't even need to play out our Bridgeworks battle, and there's no need to attack either. We'll wait for our opponent to put something on the stack, and then we'll kill them. Forsaken Monument. We'll make our move here. And that should do it. There you have it. The deck did extremely well today, even better than I expected. I think the all-star card in the deck from these matches actually turned out to be Hidden Strings, which generated a consistent stream of renewable poison damage. Our only loss was up against a very aggressive mono red deck, which if we were on the play, we would have won, which shows that the deck is capable of keeping up with the speed of Historic. During the matches, there were a handful of the one-off cards in our deck that we didn't really get to showcase. Notably, we never had Ivy in play to double up our triggers, and additionally, we never got to demonstrate March of Swirling Mist, targeting multiple Rot Priests in a single turn and generating a plethora of poison counters all at once. Based on the gameplay, you might be able to go down a land or 2 and still function. You can look at bringing in potentially another Graveyard Hate card or more protection spells, as well as potentially some more Proliferate cards. In these matches, we didn't really run into the issue where all of our Rot Priests were removed from the battlefield, so we didn't have to rely on Proliferate, but it's always a possibility that we're up against decks that have a lot of removal, and being able to get those last few points across without actually needing to keep a creature on the battlefield could be useful. The Green Sun Tutor package showed to be quite strong, although I did find that if we didn't have a Rot Priest in our opening hand, Invasion of Ikora did seem a bit too slow to keep. So with that in mind, we did need to mulligan until we had either a Rot Priest or a Green Sun. But that's still an 8 of, which gives us very high chance of getting it in the first or second mulligan. Again, 2 thumbs up for me on this one. It was really fun to play, and it performed very well. As always, I'd like to thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe for more content.